come down for a while anyways.
It's 4:01.
Okay, it's 4 o'clock. At the last Health and Human Services meeting, we agreed we'd give everybody an opportunity to speak on this matter today concerning the Civic Motel. This is your opportunity to speak up on this. What I'd like to do first is I'm going to ask, does anybody have any written comments in favor of the proposal they'd like to submit to the committee? Does anybody have any written comments against the proposal? I've got one written comment that came through the email system from a lady by the name of Wendy Zay supporting the proposal. I'm not going to read it, but if anybody has anything, we can take it now. Did anybody want to speak against the proposal? Yes, we'll start right with this lady in the middle here. Yes.
Hi, I'm Louise Roback. I'm a resident in the county. And I read the contract, the proposed contract, and I have a couple concerns. One is, my first question is, I wonder who drafted it, because it reads like it was drafted by Galvan and not the county. My concern is that it leaves it in the sole discretion of Galvan to refuse to accept the homeless people that the county asked Galvan to house. That is, it obligates the county to offer the people to Galvan, but it gives Galvan the discretion, pretty unfettered discretion, to refuse to accept people. And so my question is then, what is Plan B for the county? Because it doesn't seem to fully address the problem of how to house the homeless unless you specify in the contract and more carefully obligate Galvan to accept the people who the county wants to house. Just my uneducated reading is it seems like the only advantage this contract offers to the county is that 30% payment, which may be more than they get generally to allow for services. But in terms of solving the homeless problem, I don't see that it's a remedy for the county or the residents.
Okay, I'm going to turn that over to the Social Services Commissioner. He's here with his attorney, Mike Cozzolino, today, so that's a good question for them.
Yeah, it is a good question. I would tell you this, Galvan drafted several proposals and set them forward to the county. And the county attorneys and my attorney reviewed them. So you're quite right about the language that talks about whether to accept or not accept those residents. And I'll let Galvan speak to that. I'm certain the intent is not to block anybody coming in who would use those rooms as we intend to use them. I think it's reserving the right to not let somebody in who might be dangerous, who might be intoxicated and whatnot. So I should tell you a little bit about our vetting. The vetting, by and large, is going to be done at the department by my homeless staff. They're the ones that do the vetting every day. And indeed, they did it today, and they put people in motels today. Those same motels not only exercise that right that you talked about, but in fact have exercised it at very inopportune times and in very arbitrary ways. That's been a problem for us in the past because there is no obligation on. I gave a handout of a list of the operators that we use in the county. There is no obligation that they take anybody that we ask them to take. Indeed, we ask them to take them all. I believe this referral agreement, again, I'll let Galvan speak to it, isn't going to look to block anybody that we ask to put in there. On the contrary. What I have committed to is not put anybody out there that's a violent felon or a sex offender. And I do that not just to satisfy my obligation under the contract. That's something that I want in there, because we're going to put children and families out there who otherwise we've put in other motels around the county. Not ideal. Solve homelessness? Not even close. Not even close. It's a solution for the emergent population today, is all it is. And what does it mean? It means, it could mean as much as $230,000 a year set aside for those services. I'll speak a little bit more after we have some opportunity to hear other public comment on that. But I've sat down with service providers and asked them to imagine a budget less than that, and asked them to provide for me what services can we get, and give me your idea of how you would serve it, and give me an idea how an individual will benefit from that. Now I'm going to share that with you. I talked to a local provider who has worked with this population for many, many years. I talked to a provider who runs a shelter up in Albany County. Okay? It's not about ending the homeless situation here. We all have to do that as a community. We have to have more permanent housing. We have to talk about all of the ills that go into causing somebody to be homeless. But part of the services is delving down into that and trying to figure that out. Okay? But you're right, and Galvan drafted the contract, and they certainly should speak to any questions that you have.
Yeah, to the question of our ability to reject any guests, so that only applies when someone is we reasonably believe them to be a threat to the health, safety, well-being of whether the motel staff, the staff of the supportive service provider or DSS, or any of the neighbors or businesses that are around the motel. So those are the only people that we're going to be rejecting. We also won't accept registered sex offenders and convicted violent felons as well. And another provision is that we will prioritize placement from DSS. So if DSS sends us 25 people that are not believed to be a threat to the health or well-being of the neighbors or operators of the motel, we'll be putting them in there first before we would book the rooms for anyone else.
Did anybody want to speak against the proposal? Yes, sir, in the back here.
I'm Charlie Davey. I live a mile from, as a crow flies, from where this is going in. And I didn't know this was already a done deal. I thought there was still things coming up into the air here. And Mr. Galvan Associates said about vetting and not allowing certain people in. What's your security measures you're going to put in, and how are you going to monitor this? I didn't know this was already a done deal. I didn't know that they were already going to be guaranteed to go in there. And you do realize the problems that we've had in the area with that hotel in the past, with burglaries and wild parties and very dangerous situations. And it is a family environment. And well, my main question is, you say you can vet these people. They are on Galvan property now. How are you going to monitor who's there? How are you going to show security? Just because you vet somebody doesn't mean what they're doing in that location is what they should be doing. And I know you already probably have engineer plans and documents showing the final project. Can you explain to us what you put into the final project, such as accessibility of who comes and who goes with a key card type of automated system, what type of security cameras you were going to put in, and who's going to review these security issues? And if something does come up, and something does come out of this, who is responsible for the actions of the people living there? A couple questions.
Sure. So on the question of security, we've committed to provide 30% of the revenue from Department of Social Services rooms to fund supportive services and security, with the providers to be selected by the Department of Social Services with our input. So in terms of the security staff that are coming from that contract, I'll let the commissioner speak to that side of it. As far as what we're doing for security under the operations of the motel, we're going to be installing security cameras around the perimeter. So as you're saying, and that's based on feedback that we got from neighbors in the community, we're going to be installing those security cameras at the site. We're also going to have a live-in, a resident manager who's going to live in a house on the site. So that person will be there in case of an emergency, and they'll be responsible for supervising the motel operations staff that we'll be employing there. We will also have an evening clerk who's going to be there during evening hours. We'll be there to control access, provide admission to anyone who's being referred over from DSS later in the evening, and they'll be supervised by that live-in resident manager. So those are some of the measures. Also, our clerk staff is based right at the entrance So people can't be coming and going without checking in at that front desk first before they enter. And if they do, we'll have someone walking over there to say, hey, you gotta come over here, tell us who you are. So that's the commitment on our end. Commissioner, would you like to speak to your side of it?
Certainly. So the Office of Temporary and Disability Assistance actually controls the regulations for things like this. And I've spoken with them about some of those very issues. So the comings and goings at the hotel, which is something that's concerned me, it's concerned my staff. Lindsay Arp came into the room. She's in the back row, and she runs our homeless department in the agency. One of the main concerns that's been there long before I got here was exactly the comings and goings at these hotels, the monitoring. How do we know what's going on at those rooms? Why do we find out later that there's been, either drug use or parties going on in the room? Well, because we don't have anybody there. Nobody's there to report that. Now, that's against regulation. That's a violation. And whoever is engaging in that gets sanctioned. But indeed, how do we know? Well, a model like this offers us the opportunity to find that out. Under OTDA regs, you have to sign in if you're coming in here, and you have to sign out if you're leaving. You're going to have to come across either one of the two case managers that are going to be on duty at that time, or you're going to have to sign in with the resident when they're not on duty. So, that's how you monitor that. It's supposed to be monitored now at any number of these motels that we have people out at. Go ahead, I think you have a follow-up.
This is really way above my head. So you can right now tell us as a group, 0 tolerance for alcohol and drugs to a homeless place because they ain't got no money for rent. They don't need to be drinking, and they don't need to be dealing drugs. 0 tolerance, correct, on that site?
0.
0.
And you? Not just that site.
I'm already worried about my own backyard. I can't help everybody in the world, but 0 tolerance on that site.
Yeah, I mean, that's the regs. Those are the regs. You cannot use.
Will it be fenced in completely?
I don't know about the
Three
perimeter.
sides, anything?
No, there won't be a perimeter fence.
I have a question. So the 0 tolerance on, that's something that we discussed at a meeting, the idea that it would be a facility that has 0 tolerance for drugs and alcohol
Sure.
on site, which would include the paying clients as well in order to keep the facility a clean, drug-free, alcohol-free facility. And like you said, that's true for all existing motels with DSS clients, but that isn't the reality. So I guess what we're asking is how are you going to, I didn't see anything in the referral agreement that referred to this concept that it would be an enforceable drug-free and alcohol-free facility. So my question is, how are you planning to enforce it, and what would be the realistic consequences if that wasn't the case?
Well, again, enforcement would seem to be easier under this model than it's been in the past, right? 2 case managers there over the course of the entire day from the morning into the night, which I don't have now.
Yeah.
So, again, it's in the regulations. If you're receiving these benefits, you're eligible, you have to sign, one of the things that you have to sign that you acknowledge is that you can't do that. Now, they've always, all our clients have always had to acknowledge that they've been admonished as such. Monitoring has been the problem. Right?
So, but the case managers that would be there, 2 case managers on site during the day, what would be their actual job responsibility? Because I can't imagine being a case manager and trying to get someone to an appointment for an employment interview, as well as monitoring the other 24 rooms for alcohol usage or drug usage and such. There's 2 case managers, but they're probably more interested in certain priorities, which would probably be things related to helping your clients move forward with their lives in terms of jobs and those kind of things. So is there going to be additional security on the premises, or is part of the job of the live-in resident manager to be sort of checking, just making sure that the facility is operating in a secure manner?
Well, that's sort of two different questions, right? Because you were first wondering about the use of alcohol and substances, and how would the case managers play into that, right? How would they have oversight of that? You're quite right.
Well, how would management have oversight? Yeah, in general.
The case managers, right? Because that's who's going to oversee the caseload there. They won't do it on their own. They'll also have some staff. But, part of, when you're working every day and you're working a case, part of it's going to be, are they using? Taking assessment of your individual client. What are the needs? Remember, they come in all shapes and sizes. This is not one size fits all. This will be a chance to individualize everybody. What are the issues? Who does have a problem with substance abuse and alcohol? Because if you don't, you're told, listen, you're being put up here and we're going to provide you wraparound services. We've got transportation in place. We're going to help you with job searches. And this particular, and two of the proposals we got for services, each one of them can help find permanent housing. You tell them we're going to help you find permanent housing. You just have to work with us. But if you violate these rules, you can't stay here. Chances are they're not going to violate those rules. Now, people who might be more prone to that are going to need more intensive oversight anyway. That's going to be part of their case. Okay? So, indeed, in the past, these same regulations, these same rules applied. But that's really the time for the question, is when they're at one of these other places, how do I know? Not when they're here. I'm proposing to tell you how I would know better now than I used to in the past. Now, I think you had a tag on to that question.
Which is, I understand that in terms of the case, from the case manager's point of view, they're working with a client on the overall picture. But then, I guess what I'm asking is, at the actual physical location of the motel, how are you going to be monitoring to make sure that once the doors are closed, and that there isn't...
Well, there won't be cameras in every room, so there won't be anything like that.
No, of course not. I'm not implying that.
Okay.
I guess my question is more along the lines of, you currently have a situation where you have placing clients in motels and you might not have the same budget and space to have case managers work with them on site during the day. But, there's still, if a person is abusing substances, it's very difficult just to turn it off because they happen to be working with the case manager. So I'm just sort of, I'm thinking about the motel and the reality of what that's going to look like, and just, and just trying to be realistic about creating an operation that is healthy for everyone who's living at the motel and healthy for the neighboring school, in terms of the impact and the potential problem that
could arise.
Yeah, that could arise. And so I just really want to be realistic about the high risk of relapse and how that's going to impact the community, as well as your clients, because you're putting them in a drug-free school zone, which increases mandatory sentencing, and there's a lot of liability there. So I just want to be sure that these are things that are being clearly considered in a realistic manner.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I can promise you part of this design is in fact considering that.
Part of this design, what?
Part of this design is in fact considering that. I think I would love to tell you that it's foolproof, right? That people don't relapse, but the fact is they do. And we know that. But you're just not going to be able to stay here. And indeed, if you're relapsing, it's incumbent on me, if I can, to find you some kind of program, right? I mean, that's what we're working at already. Twin County Recovery Services contract directly with me, and I have somebody right on site. And we're trying to screen for that. But the nature of substance abuse and alcoholism, there's starts and stops. If they partake, we will have a better chance of knowing that now. and we will have a better chance at intervention. And you cannot use alcohol and you cannot use substances when we're putting you up. Not only is that a better rule to have than to not have it, that's mandated by the state. Okay, and if you get sanctioned, now I run into a whole problem with how am I going to pay for your services, right? Because they're all reimbursed services, and that's a state regulation. Okay, you need to sanction them, and that means you need to close this case. So that's how that works.
So you have to close the case, and that's the end of the...
Well, unless it's this time of year, and most of the case gets closed, but you still get housed. And I would have to remove them and find another place to put them.
But in terms of the referral agreement, there's no language that indicates that you would remove them from this motel.
Well, because that's a regulation on me.
Right, that's your judgment call.
Well, it's not just my judgment. I have to do it.
Oh. But so even if it's this time of year and you have to sanction, you unfortunately have to sanction a client and close their case, but it's this time of year, so you still have to put them up give them shelter. They will probably end up at the Galvan Motel because of the first right of
Nobody
refusal.
said that.
Well, I mean,
Nobody
I'm
said
just
that.
following the logic of the referral agreement,
Why,
which is that
why is that a logical following?
because there's no language in the referral agreement that says anything about consequences of people using alcohol or drugs in the motel, and because Galvan Motel has first right of refusal for DSS clients. So I'm just, so you know what I'm saying?
I do know what you're saying, but that falls on myself
Your
and
judgment,
my staff.
yes.
It's
Right.
not even our judgment. You know, we're being told, all of a sudden the manager says, listen, John's using again, and we found him using and he has alcohol. Okay, well that's a problem. It's a problem for my staff.
Right.
Now, the first time that we learned that, the sanction's relatively small. So we remove you, okay, and we say, if you're willing to engage in substance abuse treatment, okay, or alcoholism treatment, the case can remain,
Right.
or it's a relatively short sanction. And then, of course, they increase as they go on. So you know, Lindsay and her staff are going to say, okay, you know, let's bring him in, let's bring him or her in, let's talk about it just like they do now. And then they make their judgment, and they may refer them off for further treatment, and if they don't get the further treatment that's recommended by a professional, they're further sanctioned. That's happening now.
Right.
That's happening now. You're worried, but are you going to send them right back to the Galvan Motel? Well,
because it would make sense if, you know, where else would you send, to the other options?
Before you came, and unfortunately you didn't get it, so I'm going to hand out to you. We have a whole list of motels that we
you're
use.
saying that you...
And I imagine neighbors from all of these places
Right.
probably have the questions that you have, but don't have the luxury really of a public hearing on it, right? Because I've got nowhere else to put anybody, and I've got to house them in hotels, and therefore I do. Okay, here there's a referral agreement proposed, so at least we can talk about it, and it provides some kind of education. But, you know, whether or not they're going to end up at the Galvan Civic Motel again after that, you know, I would imagine Lindsay and her crew are going to want to use a model like this to move forward and to put clients in it who are ready to more readily move forward and work with that client somewhere else, or indeed that client may need to go in-house to treatment. I don't know. But to your question, they're not just going to be put right back there necessarily, and I don't know why you would think that.
I guess because the idea of first right of refusal made me think that you would have to first put your clients, offer the Galvan Motel.
I see. Well, let me state clearly to everybody, first right of refusal starts with Lindsay, because if she doesn't think somebody's appropriate for motel housing, she's not going to do it.
So there's no legal obligation. In terms of this contract, there's no legal obligation then.
For every client?
Yeah, to prioritize every client
No.
in the direction of Galvan Motel.
That's right. Or even motels generally if it's not safe for that client. Because the decision might be, this is not a safe move. They're not appropriate for a motel tonight.
So,
even with the intensive services we might have.
So in this model that you're proposing, if is Galvan, in terms of the legal contract, the referral agreement, is Galvan comfortable with not having full occupancy? For example, if you only, on any given night, if on your client list you only have 10 or even 7 clients or families that seem like they're ready to make that next stage, they're clean, is there any pressure on DSS to increase the numbers because you're in contract with a first right of refusal?
I'm not going to create the clientele to meet this contract, and let me say it to the chairman and everybody else now. No. I am not going to create the clientele.
So what you're saying is you're proposing a different model.
You're saying
proposing
just
a model that's different.
If that's a deal breaker, and it might be, then that's a deal breaker.
So I guess Galvan.
But I'm not doing it.
If I could address that
yeah,
same
Galvan,
question to
we've been
the
clear.
Galvan Foundation, if you could.
We've been clear that under no circumstances is DSS required to have full occupancy of this
But would
motel.
you put pressure?
That's not a requirement.
I guess the direct question is, in the terms of this contract, would you put pressure on DSS or Columbia County to prioritize clients towards your motel, even if they do not fit the profile that the Commissioner of DSS is currently painting?
If they're not an eligible homeless person, if they're not a guest who, or if they are someone who would be a threat to the health, welfare, well-being of the motel staff, DSS staff, the neighbors, then certainly not.
There's a lady in the back who's had her hand up. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I was just saying, this is such a difficult conversation because there's 2 very intense groups that are in need right now, and my question would be, one, are any of these other motels in 50 feet of a school? So I know that kind of presents a whole other issue that really isn't really vocally being discussed. And then the other is that yesterday a group of students all over our country walked out because they feel unsafe in schools. And it was kind of an absolutely beautiful thing to happen. And I just think at this point in time, as elders in a community, or being the people who are in control of making a community function, we need to think about these children and think about the safety of them. And it has nothing to do with the fact that I think it's absolutely extraordinary what you guys are proposing, and trying to create this new model is wonderful. But it doesn't leave the fact that it's within 50 feet of a school. And so I guess with that being said, how do you see this security actually really helping the safety of these children? And 2, just as a general question, do these children really need to see security? You know, like, I mean, I have 2 kids who come home. I have a teenager right now who, this is the biggest subject on his mind, is the safety of going to school. And so I know this is a whole nother conversation, but it does deeply, deeply affect this decision. And I just think that's something that really needs to be brought up. And I'd like to hear both of your thoughts on that, and how, with knowing what's going on in our culture at this specific moment, how you feel like you can help another group that's in need.
Well, absolutely. And there is not another motel within 50, if it's feet or yards or whatever it might be. No, that's not the case in Columbia County. And listen, I don't want to give it a police presence. I don't want anybody driving by or looking across from the school to think it's a gulag or something like that, because, you know, that would defeat the purpose, and I wouldn't even want to go forward with what we're talking about. You know, I think we're talking about being more intensive with each and every one of the clients. Okay, I think we're talking about being so busy working with them on a day-to-day basis and having open cases with them. I think we're talking about people monitoring them during the day. Okay, we're talking about, you know, making sure they're not just wandering off, you know, and I know that's been a problem in the past. You know, just making sure that that's not happening. But, you know, at the same time, I can't promise you it's going to swing all the way over to the other side, that it's going to be so well policed that, you know, every moment, every waking moment, they'll be fully tracked, because that's just, it wouldn't be realistic. There's just going to be more put in place than there ever has before in any model than there is today, than there will be tonight for the people who are housed around the county in these different motels. And I wish I could stop some of the other things that precipitated the walkout yesterday. I wish that I could do that, and I feel as powerless as everybody else. But I would tell you that I do. I promise you that from my staff's perspective, we will do everything that we can to exercise the oversight capabilities that we have. We will certainly do that.
Yeah, and I'll, from our end, yeah, I would say that safety and security and support, that is why we wanted to do this referral agreement. That's why we're trying to commit $200,000 a year to support the needs of the families that are going to be placed in this motel, because we're prioritizing the placement of families. We have a building set aside with 6 of the best, largest rooms that will be prioritized for families. So we're completely invested in making sure that this is a safe and secure environment. And if we weren't, we wouldn't be trying to commit $200,000 to fund the supportive services staff and security staff on site. And none of the other motels that are currently placing families offer this type of support and security. So that's why we're having this discussion today, is because Commissioner Gibson and Galvan Foundation want homeless families, homeless children, and individuals facing homelessness to be in an environment that's supportive and that's safe and secure.
Yes.
So I just have one other quick question. So I understand that there's security on the motel site, and if someone is found drinking or drugs, it's the individual's responsibility, not the hotel's. What happens if all of a sudden sort of paraphernalia ends up across the street in the playground at the next day? Like, what? I guess I'm just wondering. Like, then does it still the individual's fault, or is it just something that just starts happening across the street in the playground? Am I making sense? I know I'm not being very clear, but I guess I'm wondering. Okay, so what happens off-site? So if you go off-site and drink, you know, like you can't bring alcohol into the room, or yeah. So what happens when all of that starts happening across the street in the summer because it's a beautiful playground? You know what I mean? Like, I'm.
I understand.
Yeah, I'm just yes.
No, you can't defeat this by going off-site, going across the street. I would again want to note that. Now, you know, the reality of it is, if a couple of bottles of beer show up over there, it's going to put me on heightened alert. I'm not likely going to be able to solve that overnight. But I'm certainly going to be on heightened alert. And no, you can't circumvent this by saying, I won't be sanctioned because I'm going to go off-site here and I'm going to use. Lindsay, I think you can back me up on that. That's just not something that's tolerated. But I
guess my question is it the state's responsibility, DSS's responsibility, or is it still on the individual?
No, it's my responsibility if I learn that somebody is not acting appropriately to take action. It's my responsibility to do that. It's the individual. We want to increase the awareness of the individual so that they take responsibility, but we understand that may be a process in this case, and we'll work at it. It's my responsibility. If you were to bring that to me, or bring that to the folks that are there and say, look, we're running a school, we found these bottles of beer, and we're not going to know how they got there, but we're on heightened alert, okay? We're going to want to know about that, and so keep an eye on that. Now I want to know what's going on after hours, okay? And I want to see cameras pointing in that general direction. And I want this night person to be taking a look. Is somebody wandering off? Yeah, that's the best way that I can answer.
I guess the difficulty is in all of this is that it's knowing the history of what happens and understanding that you guys are really trying to present something new. And that's an incredible thing to do. And we do need change for all the populations discussed. But it's just, I think sometimes like just having more like concrete understanding, which I know you're trying to give us, but will help just because it is something new. So there is no system in place like this. And we only know what has happened, not what could happen.
Well, and I can appreciate that. There's folks here who can speak to the history, and it's not been a good one, and I think that they should speak to that because we should have to answer.
There was a lady over here. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, my first question is to Mr. Galvan. I understand you have 810 apartments in Hudson. Are they all full? Because this is where the services are, mental health, you know, the public service, they're all here. Your apartments are all full?
So I'm Mr. Kent from Galvan Foundation. But yeah, so we have a very high occupancy rate for our apartments. We have 180 affordable housing units in Hudson. We've committed to develop 29 additional units this year. And yeah, we maintain a very high occupancy rate. We do have 20 buildings that are uninhabitable, vacant buildings. That may be what you're thinking of, but we wouldn't place someone in a space where their health and welfare is in
There was
danger.
not grant money available to rehab these places in Hudson for these people, but it was available for this.
Oh, so we have ongoing affordable housing development here in Hudson. So we've been consistently developing more and more affordable units. And we've talked with Commissioner Gibson about how these 29 units that we've committed to develop this year, a lot of them could be a really great fit for folks who are in emergency housing and need to transition to permanent housing. So we've been committed across the housing spectrum, everything from trying to find solutions to emergency housing needs, trying to create low-income and moderate-income housing, and also trying to create special needs housing and partnering with organizations that serve that population. You're very welcome.
Next question is for the supervisors. How long has this been going on that we were going to do this to this motel? And there was only one other meeting that we could attend, but there was a snowstorm, so we didn't. So how long has this been in the works? Because I think we're just here now for lip service, because like Mr. Davies said, this is a done deal.
Well, I wouldn't say that, ma'am, because nothing's been signed by the county, agreed to. We had a meeting when this came to fruition, I believe back in the month of February. It was discussed at the last health and medical meeting, and we agreed to have one meeting devoted to give you and everybody else an opportunity to speak to your concerns. And this is not going to be voted on tonight, but it'll probably be the subject of some discussion at the next Health and Human Services meeting, which is Tuesday at 4 o'clock.
So you're saying that this is not a done deal?
There's nothing been signed by the county, agreed to by the county, or approved by the Board of Supervisors.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anybody else who would like to speak? Yes, sir, Mr. Friedman.
I just wanted some clarification, actually, at this point, because I read the contract and I was a little confused. It's $85 per eligible homeless person per night. Does that include children? Can a minor child be an eligible homeless person under this contract?
Individuals and families, and we'll have 6 rooms that are set aside for families.
And families are dealt with a little bit differently from our perspective as well. They're covered differently. They're under federal funds, not safety net funds. So, and there's obviously certain regulations that have to be filed. If we're putting up families, then we have an open preventative case. I'm speaking strictly in terms of our perspective. I'm not thinking that there's an individual charge rate for the child. I think it's a room charge, as I understand it.
Because it's not written down. I mean, it's per person. It's pretty expressly per person.
Yeah, we can clear that up. Yeah, it's $85 per room. Per room, yeah, per placement, I guess.
I have a larger kind of policy question, and I don't know if it's been addressed yet. I just found out about this whole process in the last week or so. But I do remember a few years ago when some of these topics came up and we were talking about the difference between emergency housing and supportive housing and long-term supportive housing, and I think I have sort of a grip on that. It's very confusing, and I know your department deals with a lot of complex issues, and thank you. But here's my question is, reading through some of the materials that I found on your agency's website and from the state, but also the county, this motel type of housing seems to be disfavored by just about everybody because of both because of the cost, but also because the outcomes seem to be kind of miserable. And it's not considered an ideal environment for a lot of people, and there often are small children, minor children in these environments, correct? So why are we doing this? Why are we committing so much to perpetuate a system that we know has bad outcomes and is exceptionally costly? The county's report is, I think, 2011. 7 years later, and we're treating a emergency motel housing proposal like it's a one-off contract that the board can enter into without any competitive bidding. But it's not. It's more of the same. It really is more of the same. Moving the services closer to the recipient is a good idea, but we're basically just paying to warehouse homeless people on an emergency basis in hotels when we already know that's the least effective, least efficient, and least humane way to do it. And I just don't know why we're still doing this. Why are we even entertaining this? Why aren't we as a county doing something like building an emergency shelter so we can have more control over this process, so that the amount of money that the taxpayers invest is actually spent not for the motel owner's benefit necessarily, but for the recipient's benefit? That's my question to you guys.
Well, and I'll certainly let the
No,
supervisors...
I think you can address it. You've been involved.
What you say is what I said in 2014 when I came into the office. I looked at all those reports. I did. I looked at 2011. I looked through a box this big on a proposal that was going to happen over on 7th Street that was supposed to be a supportive shelter. And there were other proposed models around. You're right, the state doesn't like this. OTDA, who I spoke to today, they're happy we're moving forward with some idea down here that has services involved with it. But is it the ideal? It's not. I think everything you read has been out there for everybody to read. It's been out there for everybody to read. It's been discussed in this county for the better part of 8 or 9 years, well before I came on board. I came on board and read all this and started coming to the committee, first talking to my commissioner and then coming to the committee, saying, we're aware of all this, are we not? And tonight, we're putting people in hotels. Not theoretically down the road when Galvan builds this. Tonight. And that's kind of been my point. So I don't disagree with you.
And I appreciate that. And so with all due respect, I didn't ask the commissioner. I asked you and your colleagues.
Oh, I can answer that.
Yes,
I've been
please.
here for 8 years, and Mr. Gibson, or Commissioner Gibson, just referred to a proposal on 6th Street, and there was a tremendous outcry about it. I worked very closely with Bill Hughes here about locating a facility in the city of Hudson for 4 years when I was chairman, and it came to naught. There's a tremendous amount. Well, can I finish, please?
I'm sorry.
There was a tremendous community opposition to do this, but one lesson we did come out of it with is that we had to do this with some entity, whether it was a private entity that would either provide the housing or would provide the services, that we county couldn't possibly go out, build a place, locate a place, build a place, provide the services. It just was not, it was a non-starter. So this is where we are now. I agree with you that it's not the ideal solution, it's not the perfect solution, but keep in mind, tonight, how many homeless people do you have, Commissioner?
Lindsay, do you have tonight's count? Yeah.
Between 85 and 95.
So we've got between 85 and 95 people we have to house tonight. This is, the idea of this is that yes, somebody would go to the Civic Motel, would stay in the Civic Motel, and would be monitored, would be transitioned into permanent housing, particularly if they were families, and there'd be some supervision of them, and there'd be some attention to their needs, whether it was mental health needs or substance abuse needs or so on and so forth. That's where we are right now. Even if this were filmed by Columbia County tonight, there'd be 25. There'd still be tonight 70 other people who are homeless in Columbia County.
Well, that assumes one person per room. But again, you know, at some point, we have to stop and say, we need a new way. I'm not aware that the county has generated an RFP. If you're looking for a private entity, you're the only one who knows that, because there is no process. And so we end up with more of the same. And you know, I remember the 7th Street project, and it did have some supportive aspects to it, but that was not emergency housing. This is emergency housing. That was transitional supportive housing. This is how I learned about all that stuff, was from that process, that and some of the earlier projects that have been presented, and they've all been, you know, somewhat more of the same or lacking in something else. The community in Hudson, I don't think, objected to homeless people being housed there, because homeless people are being housed in Hudson every night. We already know that. It was a model that we didn't believe, that most people didn't believe would work based on the contract. I don't think it ever got past that stage, if I recall. But I mean, we look to you for leadership, and frankly, this is more of the same. I'd like to see something different. I think that we've presented you with something a little different.
Well, I would like to say that Mr. Friedman presented a proposal here tonight, just when we started the meeting, and there's copies for everybody, working with his client on 9, mobile homes to provide housing.
Yes, sir.
So, and I'm going to pass that around to committee, and it can be considered and everything else, but take heart, you know, something like that isn't out of the ballpark, because we have so many homeless people that we have to take care of.
And I don't believe that what we offer is a panacea either. And I don't believe that, you know, going out to an RFP for an emergency shelter is a panacea either. Clearly, there's systemic issues. These are just temporary solutions. I get that, and I can appreciate that. I really do appreciate it.
No, I can appreciate that idea, and if that's a suggestion for more permanent housing, we take you up on that, so we'd like to talk to you about that.
Yes, Supervisor.
I want to talk in favor of all the people.
Sure,
okay. So the first thing I'd like to say is, I would love for us to get off the conversation of calling this a shelter, and more of supportive housing, because when we're dealing with people, a lot of these people really just need some sort of help, and not necessarily substance abuse help. And so I want to bring that point up, is we seem to be conflating the issue that all these people who are going into our homeless supportive housing have some sort of substance issue. And that is the furthest from the truth. In fact, I'd like to know how many people in this room have actually sat down and talked to people who are homeless, because I myself have advocated for a lot of them, and I have talked to some of them within the last couple of weeks. And quite frankly, you have people who are in families who are either poor money managers, or lost their job, or some form of a traumatic family incident that led to their homelessness. Or you had, for example, like the individual with a house burnt down here on the corner of 3rd Street, and they were looking for apartments, and they end up homeless. So not everybody going into our supportive housing have some sort of substance abuse. It is just not true. And in fact, most of them don't have any kind of criminal record whatsoever. So when I hear a lot of the fear mongering of that they may do something or pull some kind of threat, it's just really disturbing to me, that the fact that we stigmatize our homeless like this. That's one. But when we come to the models, Mr. Freeman was right. There are 3 silos, and we talked about these 3 silos many a times when I was on the board. And we're talking about emergency housing, transitional housing, and permanent housing. And it seems like what he was talking about with the trailers would be a great idea for the permanent housing. When we start talking about this particular model, it is not the same. when Commissioner Moon came down here to do his study, within his study, he had a great model. And what did he do with his model? They actually purchased the old hotel and they provided wraparound services, and they were able to get people in there, provide them with the services, and transition them out. And that's what this was supposed to be. You have people that DSS actually have as clients right now who, like I said, have issues. They may not be good money managers. They just need to be mentored and worked up to the point to where they can actually sustain living on their own so that they don't fall under the auspices of DSS anymore, helping them get employed and all those various services, various ideas. That is the important part. We could put someone in permanent housing and they will eventually end back up on DSS rolls if we don't try to cut off, you know, what caused them to become homeless in the first place. So the idea behind this model was to get families and individuals in here, provide them with services, make sure that they themselves were safe and not being, you know, stigmatized. And not only that, but that they had appropriate services, transportation. They were able to get hot meals. They had internet access. These are all the things that our homeless population doesn't have right now. And those are barriers that are put in place that, one, are keeping them homeless, two, are really damaging their kids and making it very difficult. We have kids right now who are homeless in hotels, and then we're asking them to go to school and educate themselves too. And it's very difficult for some of these families to survive in the hotel model that we have in place. This is not that same model. This would provide them with those services. This would allow them to try to flourish and to move out and to get into stable housing. This would allow individuals, once they become employed, they are not then, you know, they more than likely probably wouldn't income qualify, and they too will move out into more permanent housing, if the permanent housing is available. Because the model that we were looking at Hudson, we were looking at, and I was the lead of that project, we were looking at was more permanent. And the only reason why it was becoming more permanent is because we had nowhere to transition them to. You have people who were in a permanent style housing and they were going to transition to anywhere because rents, the average rent in around this area was like $800 to $1,000, and they didn't have it. So even no matter what model we create, if we create a model and we have people who are ready to transition into permanent housing, exactly where is that permanent housing that we're going to transition them to? Because truthfully, when we create transitional housing, the state doesn't like them to be in there more than 6 to 8 months. But in many cases, when we went to visit some of the facilities in Albany, they were ending up in there 1, 2, 3 years, to the point that where you look at some of the models in Albany now, they have created community cultures within themselves. They have created cooking kitchens where they're training people for professional services that are working in some of the small restaurants, and they are now serving meals out in the community. They have given them jobs within the facility where they're sweeping. They have created their own security, and these people are becoming employed themselves within the facilities within Albany. I see this with the potential of having that kind of a model, but I certainly don't want us to continue to stigmatize these people who are going into supportive housing as though they pose some sort of threat.
Yes, ma'am.
I just actually wanted to speak to the gentleman's comments. A lot of what's heard today is boiled down from community group meetings and you know, things that have happened at the school and conversations that have happened between school parents, business owners, also based on past experiences in the local community to the hotel. I think that a lot of Jennifer's comments were based and asking the questions pointedly to substance abuse, to those issues because of the school being there. I don't feel that the local community is stigmatizing every homeless person as a substance abuser. It's just that we've boiled down to, we know this is the 1%, but the 1% has made our lives miserable in the past. So I don't believe that anyone's trying to come up with that. It's just that this is like our 5th meeting of trying to talk amongst ourselves. And it's just coming out here that this is the biggest and greatest concern, is that, you know, the property damage, the substance abuse so close to a school, those things that can happen. My next question, if it's okay for me to go on then, I just wanted to say that, you know, I don't think that any of us are prejudiced to homeless, but we have experiences that were very negative. My next question is kind of in an attempt to kill some misconceptions among the local community, and it's kind of pointed questions to, I forgot your name? From
Dan.
Dan, okay. This contract, and it's actually also the commissioner, this contract that's in place is similar or dissimilar to contracts with other hotels that are on that list?
There are no contracts with other
Okay.
hotels.
And Galvan could open as a hotel providing services without this contract, just like everybody else on the list.
Well, they could certainly do that.
Exactly. So with or without this contract, Galvan could house homeless, not provide services, and not have this wonderful program in place or attempt to put this into place with or without the board's approval. Or the commission, I'm not sure what you're called, the board or commission, I'm sorry.
Supervisors.
Supervisors, sorry. So Galvan could open as a hotel and house the homeless with or without us. They just have to sign up to be on the list like everybody else, correct?
It's not a list that you
I'm
sign
just
up.
saying-
You come in and you get your eligibility determined.
Yeah, but I'm just trying to,
No, I
I'm trying to
understand.
make sure, because there's a lot of, well, if we get you guys to disagree that this is a bad idea, it won't happen there. And that's, I just wanted that cleared up for the local community that, you know, the Board of Commissioners can say, we don't want to do that, or whatever you are, sorry, can say, we don't want to do this, and they can still house the homeless there.
Right.
End of story, correct? And so everybody understands that that's the case?
And from other counties, too.
Yeah. So we have the programs that are a possibility. There's a lot of things I think that need to be worked out there still, and I have personally questions about the security, but again, I wanted to make sure that everybody understands.
Thank you. Did anybody else wish to speak? Yes, ma'am.
Speaking from the perspective of working with families that have been homeless, I've been doing this work for 11 years. I've been a social worker for 30 years, and of those 30 years, these 11 years have been the most challenging working with homeless children. And I worked in hospice, and I'm telling you that this is the most challenging work that I've done. And a lot of that has to do with what we are presenting to our families for their emergency housing. And my first thought is that's always been a hotel. So there has been the risk of people drinking or having recreational activities on those grounds. The fact that it will now potentially be homeless families, I don't see that as increasing that risk. And with the added security, I actually see it as decreasing the risk for those events happening in that area. And to speak to what our families have to endure when they're placed in the emergency housing in this county, because we do not have a shelter that's overseen by a general board committee, by a general administrative agency, let's say, because it's many different hotels, there is no continuity of service. And what I have seen in these times is I've watched as a mom struggles with taking her 3-month-old and saying to me that she now has to go into the shower stall to bathe her 3-month-old. I don't know about any of you, but that's not so easy. I had to do it one time when I had a fire at my house, in the place that I got booked in. That's what I had available to me, and it was horrible. So to not even have a sink available, or to not even have a sink available to wash out your child's clothing, your clothing. The sinks are about the size of an airplane sink generally. A lot of times the water is not working sufficiently. Sometimes it's the hot water that's not working. Sometimes it's the cold water that's not working. The beds are abysmal in many of the hotels that I have visited. And I've been to lots of them because I go out to the families on a regular basis. And the frames are broken, half of the bed is on the floor, the box springs are torn, shredded, the mattresses are stained beyond recognition of being a mattress. The sheets are never replaced in many of the hotels, never. So you can be there for 3 weeks or 3 months, and you're existing with the same set of sheets often that you came in with, and they're threadbare. I remember bringing in a set of sheets to you, Commissioner Gibson, one time that I had asked a family to, could I just please borrow this set of sheets because nobody believes what you are living through. There was a time when they were making families pay for toilet paper. And nothing could be done about that because the motels know that it's a captive audience. There's not tons of them lining the streets to take our families, so we'll get away with whatever we can get away with because we know you got nowhere else to go. We're the only game in town. As far as cooking facilities, oftentimes there's a microwave, can't say 100% of the time, and that microwave a lot of times isn't working. So I have a collection of microwaves that are donated to me by people in the district so that when a family tells me their microwave's broken and the owner won't give them a new one, I bring them out a microwave. The refrigerators are the size, anyone who sent their kids off to college or went to college yourself, you know, they're this big. And a lot of times they're not working either. And there is no freezer compartment, so it's kind of difficult to prepare a meal that's cost effective for a family when you are working off of a refrigerator this big and a microwave that maybe isn't working or is working, and you can't really wash your dishes because the sink is this. Maybe these things sound silly or trivial to some of us because when we think hotel, we think, oh my God, I'm going on vacation, I'm going to a hotel. And even things, families when they're placed at the Bel Air, I think it's the Bel Air, I shouldn't have said a name, but if they're placed at a place where there's a pool, our families aren't allowed, our homeless families, you can't use the pool. That must feel really great for those kids to really feel in with the rest of the kids that are there at the hotels. Laundry facilities, again, the sheets are not washed generally. Towels are not provided on a regular basis. Again, thank God for the generosity of the community, and we work very close with the Salvation Army, works very closely with us. The employees in the district bring in towels, they bring in sheets, they bring in microwaves, because we want our students to come in and learn algebra, but last night they didn't have anything to eat and they couldn't take a shower because there was no soap, and food stamps don't pay for soap and shampoo, so you're hoping that that might be supplied by the hotel people. The case management aspect that's being offered in this, I'm seeing this as a temporary solution, Dan, this hotel. I'm seeing that we will grow into a shelter, perhaps. But until we can get a shelter, this is the closest that we can come with having some case management services available. The families do come into DSS on a regular basis, those that are homeless. However, it's not an intensive case management that help that they can get when they go to DSS. That's not your function. So having case management on site would be a support to the families as far as getting the children. There are children that should be enrolled in Head Start, but nobody knows that because they're out in a hotel and they haven't gotten all of that information. So you have a case manager on site, they're going to hook you up. They're going to tell you about the services that are out there. Having the transportation available, again, a real bonus for our families. And I'm really concerned about our children. I would not be advocating for something that I would see as a riskier endeavor for our children. This is a much less risky endeavor than many of the places where our children are placed now, where there is no security on site, there is no 24-hour staffing. I have so much more I could say. I just want you to remember that when we're talking about this particular endeavor, we're talking about children, and they didn't do anything to earn that. They didn't do anything to earn their homelessness. They are homeless by virtue of the fact that their family is homeless. And most that I speak to are not very different than any of us sitting in this room. I know we like to think we're very different. Not very different. Many of us are one paycheck or perhaps two paychecks away from not being able to meet our mortgage, not being able to pay our electric bill, and you have a catastrophic medical event, that wipes you out. You have the breadwinner has to leave, maybe because of a domestic violence situation, maybe because of a criminal situation. That breadwinner has left now. The children are left with the one parent and not enough income to maintain their housing. Again, the 7-year-old didn't do this. The 7-year-old is brought into this by their parents. As a community, I believe it's our responsibility to make as safe an environment for our children as we can. And I've reviewed this from the time that Mr. Kent brought it forth to the Housing Coalition that I'm a member of, and this is like the best of the not so great already, but this is better than what is in place, and I believe that there is safety in place, and it can get better, and I hope it would grow towards a shelter situation where this would be available for all of our homeless.
Ma'am, there's a lady over here, yes.
Hi. It's actually sort of what that lovely woman over there said and John said, and I'm just curious. Galvan has, I think, last count, 86 properties in the city. And many of them are empty. And many of them are large enough to do what you're doing out at the motel. And everybody is saying the motel is by far the worst model available. And you have said, you know, that we really have an interest to help, and that's why we're doing this. So my question is, why would you choose to renovate a motel that already has a history of it not working, rather than really helping and using one of many of your properties in Hudson and refitting that to be really a shelter that we really need in the county and the city? That's how.
Sure. So to that point, we responded to an RFP from the Department of Social Services about 3 or 4 years ago with one of our buildings proposing to create both emergency and transitional housing.
Which
Unfortunately, it was called Galvan Quarters. It was at 7th Street and State Street in Hudson. So that didn't go forward, and the reason that we submitted a response to that RFP was we talked to previous commissioners, we talked to Bill Hughes when he was a supervisor, and we'd heard that the conditions in the current motels were not meeting the needs of this population. So we were just committed to continuing to explore opportunities to find a solution. So we've continued to meet with new commissioners as they come on board, and Commissioner Gibson told us, he said, I really need some decent motel rooms. All I need is some nicer motel rooms to place people in, because these current motels that Tara was describing, they don't even want to receive DSS clients. They give a hard time.
That didn't answer my question.
I'm
so sorry.
Oh yeah, I'll continue. So I'm kind of explaining why this motel model. So it is true, there are documents from housing experts and others who say that motel emergency housing is the worst type of emergency housing. The reason that it's the worst type of emergency housing is because the rooms are often substandard in terrible condition, like the conditions that Tara described, and because there's no supportive services and there's no security. So we've taken a motel and we've created rooms that are going to be beautiful, completely renovated, nice, the kind of motel rooms that any of us would put our families in. And there will be supportive services and security. So there are certainly issues with most motel emergency housing. We've done our best to address them through this referral agreement. Regarding our involvement in housing generally, so we've committed to develop 29 units of affordable housing this year.
That's wonderful. I'm talking about a shelter, just like this woman just said, that really, and I think what John was addressing was, as a county, as a place, it's something that, and you are a wonderful partner because you do have an enormous amount of resources and a lot of real estate.
Sure, and to that point, we are completely open to continuing to explore the development of emergency housing, transitional housing, permanent supportive housing, going forward. We're absolutely committed to continuing those conversations, but this need has been going on for too long, and we just felt we need to do something right now, because these families, these individuals have been receiving no supportive services, no security, and in substandard rooms for too long. So for us, it was just, we need to do something urgently, and this is the best way to get this done right away and to do better for these people.
Yes, in the back there, sir, in the middle. Gentleman, right
Yes,
there.
I would like to say that I'm first of all generally supportive of the idea. I think that it makes, John Friedman had said we need a longer term solution for these people that is a better model, and I absolutely agree with that. But in the short to medium term, I think this presents a clear step up. Of the $230,000 that is supposed to help with, initially I had heard that it was just for supportive services. Now it's for security and supportive services. So I'm curious how much security on site is going to cost and take out of that budget. Is this also going to cover on-site management and night managers? Are those considered supportive services? I mean, what of that $230,000 is going to go for stuff that would be at a motel anyway, and what of it is going to go to actually help the people, the clients in need? Because that is not listed in the contract at all. It's very vague.
I'll try to repeat the question. I think you were wondering what amount of the money of the set-aside would go to supportive services and what supportive services.
Let's say it goes to security and on-site management.
What I've done is talk with 3 different service providers since the last time I met with the public. They hadn't had an opportunity to sort of put anything together yet. 2 of them gave me sort of write-ups on what they could provide. I had them imagine a budget somewhere around $190,000 because I don't want to assume that there's going to be full occupancy all of the time. And I told them that security had to be a part of it, and they had to do a set-aside to an extent that would allow for some sort of oversight beyond case management. So in other words, it would be somebody's job to make sure the perimeter, is relatively secure. Not make this a gulag, it's not a police state, but it's going to be watched. Well, case managers were going to have to individualize the client roster so that we could start to drill down into that. And I simply asked them, could they provide for me a list of what services that they would be able to do under a budget like that. First and foremost, they wanted to perform assessments on each and every client. So if you come in and you're a first time, you're going to get an assessment. You're going to want to know what are the needs. You're going to want to know what's your history. What kind? How have you been in and out of homelessness? Or are you going to be going forward? And how are we going to do that? We want to identify skills and supports. They would have trained staff to do that. They were going to make referrals to appropriate services. So in other words, the group who are actually in Hudson in particular are pretty well connected with the service provider groups. So they broke down individually, these are the ways we would make referrals. These are the folks that we would work with. These are the things we would do to have skill building activities. This is the healthy eating and hygiene that we would use. I spoke with Salvation Army who are willing to provide more nutritious groceries that would go to the common kitchen. And I told the service providers, imagine that you would have something like that. What would you do to provide the ability to learn how to budget, to learn how to make healthy meals? All that will go into it. One of the things that really has my staff leaning towards one rather than another is that there would be an ability to transition to permanent housing with one of these groups because they own and operate some of those. They would help with the application towards that. They would help with identifying. I have St. Catherine's is already under contract, so I can mention them by name, in my building. They're one of the providers that I talk to, but they also have a relationship with the other provider. St. Catherine's in particular has run a shelter in Albany that includes oversight and security that we've talked about. You're probably talking about 30%, without just in general terms speaking to them, of your budget in there that you're going to provide for someone to provide some kind of security. That's above and beyond the security cameras that are going to be placed in there and the like. You're talking about somebody that's focused on that, or some kind of function in there. Whether or not it's going to be the provider or they're going to identify somebody through the budget. But if part of the question is there going to be a specific set aside for security, there is.
And you think that's going to be about 40,000 of it?
Yeah, and again, nobody gave that figure, but as I talked to them, I said, are we talking 50%, 40%, 30%? What percent of the budget has to go in to security? The thought was probably somewhere about 25 to 30%.
Now, the night club and an on-site property manager are not part of that
That's not
$10,000.
That's not, nor are the cameras part of that. This is sort of, and then I'll get to some questions. So, you know, that's generally the rough of it. You know, I just wanted to make sure that if we were going to bring service providers in, they could sort of develop a plan that made sense to me. That says, yeah, not only are we going to be on site, and not only are we going to be, you know, providing some oversight, but we're actually going to be providing services that are going to move your clients forward. We're going to be able to identify issues that they face. We're going to be able to particularize a set of services to your clients. And we're going to be able to report to you on what that plan is and report to you on the success or the lack thereof of that. So that's kind of what you're looking at. You're going to know the providers when you hear about them, the ones very prominently local. The other we're already in contract with doing searching for permanent housing, and they have quite a bit of experience in Albany County of the shelter model, and I think they could bring a lot to the table if it were that. Thank you.
Yes, gentlemen.
I came to the wrong meeting. I thought we were here to find out about replacing Greenport, about whether or not you're going to go into contract. I didn't know we were going to decide about the homeless situation in Columbia County. I imagine we've done this time and time again over the years. When I came here, I thought it was like decide whether or not you're going to go into contract with DSS to put homeless people in this new hotel that Gavin's putting up. That's what I thought we were here for, and I'm getting kind of cloudy now because it's all about homeless and about the good things. Now, no one says we don't need homeless shelters, but this meeting I thought was to decide or just recommend whether or not you're going to go into contract. And it seems like every time we do something in Columbia County, we're rushing through it. What would be wrong is we can't tell what's going to happen in this thing. Maybe I'm really off base, and maybe this thing might be the best thing from the wheel. Why can't you go into a 12-month, 6-month, 18-month contract at the end of this time? If there's been violence, if there's been drinking, if there's been people in the playground with hypodermic needles, if there's been things happen at a school, if there's been problems with infrastructure where it's contaminated A1 aquifer, you can say, hey, we gave you a trial period. We wanted to try to do what we could do. It looks like a great idea. It looks like the better than the wheel. But we want to try it first. We won't want to just commit to a big investment, a big time. And if you do everything you said, and everybody's on the up and up, and all the paperwork's been filed properly, and there's no problems for a 12-month period, then I guess it's probably a pretty damn good thing. But if all of a sudden it comes out, you find out, you see pictures of people bringing 6 packs of beer in, or a big brawl, the sheriff's got to go there, or at 10 o'clock at night, you see people in the parking lot having a good old time, or on the playground across the street, or people breaking into houses, then maybe you might say, we want to give you a contract, but it doesn't work in that area, and people don't deserve to have that. And if it does work out, I'll be the first one. Great thing. But I thought we were here to try to find out from the supervisors if you're going to go into this deal. As far as how homeless goes, it's way over my head. But to jump into something, an ironclad contract, when you don't know what's going to happen 3 months down the road, but you will know what's going to happen 3 months down the road in 3 months, then maybe it might be an idea to do something temporary.
Thank you. There's Commissioner Cole. You want to address it?
Hi, good evening. I'm Michael Cole. I just wanted to explain my support for this project. My perspective is as a social worker for now 40 years, very familiar with case management services, residential services, clinical services, and services for the homeless. I'm the Columbia County Director of Community Services, and I'm responsible for the care and treatment for those impacted by mental illness, addiction, and intellectual disabilities in Columbia County. I'm also on the board for the Columbia Green homeless housing continuum of care, along with Tara. Those are my perspectives. I guess an additional perspective is that I have experience operating a motel with wraparound supportive services. Supported housing works. This is may not be a permanent solution, a complete solution. It may not be a perfect solution. I think many people have identified that this is a partial solution and maybe an interim solution. But I can tell you that supported housing works. Whatever percentage of individuals who use this facility have mental health issues or substance abuse issues, I'm not quite sure, but anyone who struggles with homelessness, housing instability, they need stable housing to recover and to gain skills and gain the tools they need to move into permanent housing and gain housing stability. The situation that we have now with our hotels is unacceptable. It's unsafe. I'm scared for a number of parties with the current system. I'm primarily concerned about individuals who I am responsible for their vulnerability in the current facilities. They are isolated. They are unsupervised in conditions that may not meet standards. Let me be generous. The model that we're talking about, in the place that we're talking about, it seems ideal to me. To provide wraparound services and to provide a congregate situation where services can be infused is ideal. This is a perfect opportunity for individuals struggling with whatever they're struggling with that brought them to homeless to gain skills and achieve recovery. I want to just lastly just comment that whatever $200,000 or whatever the budget is for the on-site care management and supportive and security services that have been identified, I am confident that there are two services that will support, in addition to that, will support individuals with mental health and substance abuse services needs. Those two services are home and community-based waiver services and health home care coordination services. Both of those services are intended to serve exactly the people that would be using that facility, and there will be an opportunity for agencies who provide those services in the community now to meet with clients at the hotel and in the community to support them in addition to the case management that's built in addition to the security that's built in. Thank you.
So I want to address two issues. One, I hear a lot about here in the meetings, but I also see in writings on Facebook and so forth, a lot of people saying, how come we aren't building more supportive housing or a center in the city of Hudson? Well, quite frankly, because of the zoning. Hudson has a pretty restrictive zoning when it comes to building transitional housing. I'm working right now with another facility looking to build something up and around 20 rooms. And quite frankly, it is very difficult in the city of Hudson. You're either going to be in the 7th Street area by the firehouse or on the left side of Green Street, and that is it. So any other properties, I don't know what the properties, how many properties Galvan owns and where they are throughout the city. I know a lot of them, but I don't know all of them. But I can tell you, he may have only one, maybe two that are within that zoning area that would allow him to build. If the city wants to change the zones and allow for that, I certainly would welcome that, because I have another agency that is looking to build a different type of housing. I have a gentleman that approached me that was offering up his house on Allen Street to build anything from transitionals to permanent housing. but I already know it's a non-starter. You know, it's a beautiful house. I toured it with a couple of people, but it would be a non-starter. It doesn't fit within the zone, and most of the properties don't. Hudson has a small little sliver that would allow for transitional housing. As far as talking about services, I'm not going to mention any names because I know the commissioner and his agency are going to have to pick one, and I know that I toured those agencies in Albany, 4 of them, and I toured one towards the other, the farthest end of Albany, and I toured 2 facilities that are directly in the middle of the city of Albany, run by a specific agency. And I can tell you though, for the amount of money that they were receiving and the services they were providing was impeccable. I mean, they ended up, they were the ones that provided that services, what I was talking about, where they created a professional kitchen. They helped the employees develop their own employment skills and created micro businesses within themselves. They provided daycare. They provided a whole myriad of services outside of what they were really being paid for by the county, because they saw that as giving back to the community. And that's why I said when they started providing these wraparound services, it became a culture within itself. So I know there's a couple of agencies out there, and I know that DSS are talking to them, so I don't want to try to persuade them to go one way or the other. That will provide a high level of professional services that would bring a great deal of relief, I think, to some of the individuals and families that we would have in a place like this.
Thank you. Is there any other comments? Yes, ma'am, you haven't spoken. Yeah.
I'm Gail Carroll from the Opportunities. I've worked with quite a few of you in the past. And I've worked in housing for a very long time. And homelessness, affordable housing, permanent housing has always been an issue in Columbia County. And it's always going to be an issue. We have buildings that are boarded up, they're not being re-rented, but the fact that we have an organization like Galvan who wants to develop a motel for homeless individuals and have services provided by the county at a cheaper rate than what we're doing now, we need to start somewhere. And nobody wants anything in their own backyard, but the fact is there's homelessness, there's problems with getting services to them, and we need to start somewhere. So if it means entering into a contract with the district for a trial period, let's say, yes, let's do this, start it. If it works, we'll continue. If it doesn't work, we tried it. But we've got to stop putting up these road barriers and roadblocks to families, to the children, and to organizations like Galvan who wants to help better the population of Columbia County.
Thank you. Yes.
Just technically, in this contract it says it's a 25-room motel, but I'm confused when you talk about families and the rates. So you're basing your numbers off 25 rooms, but the families, are they in one of those 25 rooms, or, that's a little confusing. And I'm not a lawyer, so the contract, fine print, I think there's some things in here that need to be clearer in how this is constructed. That's very confusing to me. Does the family take up 5 rooms? And Mr. Friedman brought this up before, but it's 25 rooms times $85, or is it 20 rooms times $120, or, that I think has to, Mr. Cozzolino, we need some help there, don't you think?
Well, I heard Mr. Freeman's comments, and it's certainly something that we'll go back and look at. If there's some ambiguity that shouldn't be there, we'll address it. But as I understand it, it's $85 per room. Some of these rooms are going to be designed for a family placement.
That should be in here so that we're clear about what the family room rate is, don't you think? I'm just pointing it out. I'm not a lawyer, so.
No, I think that's a fair question, because I'll tell you that there are, we do similar arrangements in a couple of places, and we do get charged for 2 rooms. So in other words, if it has to be a suite, you get charged for each one of those rooms.
Because that affects also how much money is going to be coming in for these additional services. So it's a little confusing just from a contract point of view.
No, I don't disagree, and if I understand it correctly, and perhaps it should be better worded, it's per room, not per individual, so that you can get a sense of that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, yeah, we can clarify the language. It may have said per diem when it should say per room. So thank you for that. And yeah.
Yes, Supervisor Nate.
Excuse me if I come back. There's no fail-safe to anything. This is a model of something that might not be perfect, but it's better than what we have. Supervisor Hughes stated the same thing. Don't judge me till you walk in my shoes. Everybody is not a drug addict. Everybody is not a drunkard. Okay? Some of these people, put yourself in this position. How do these people get homeless? Some of it's no fault of their own. They might have lost a job. They might have couldn't pay their mortgage. Sometimes they just end up. We're assuming that homeless people are people that just walk around with shopping wagons and, you know, what you see on TV. This model here will help give them not a handout, but a hand up. Because if you're in a room and you're housed in one of these other motels, and there's no soap, and there's no this, and you got to fight for this, and there's no caseworker to help you, what do? You just sit there and you don't feel good about yourself and you just stay there. You have a caseworker. You have somebody that takes pride. Somebody wants to go out and they got clean linen, they got clean clothes, and they go to a caseworker and they're looking for a job, okay? Do you want to go to a job feeling good about yourself so when you go there you project yourself for somebody that wants a job? That is a hand up. And there's no perfect solution. And to think, and I realize that this was in my back. Everybody, I understand people that live close to the area are going to be more concerned. But you have a motel here. You have a shot at better control with a motel working through with Columbia County. That motel is going through either way. They're going to open up a motel. Anybody can go into that motel. Drug addicts, child rapists, anything. You go to any motel and you check in, they don't ask you all that stuff. You don't do it. So then, how do you know that's not going to happen, you know, where people are going to go out of the area? This is a better control, and it's a good place for people. And again, I don't know that this is the best solution, but it's better than what we have now. Okay, and I just want everybody to think about that. Thank you.
Yes, sir. You didn't speak.
Tom Alvarez. I represent an age-restricted community called the community of Bells Pond. I think I provided signatures of the folks that are opposed to this project. Now, there's nobody opposed to helping people. I've helped my share of people throughout the years because that's what I do. I provide housing for people that need a place to live. But because of the prior experiences that we had when it was a Sunset Motel, they're concerned. Because they're 55 and over, probably the average age is 75. Some are widows, live by themselves. They just know what the experiences were prior to it. All of the safeguards that are put in place, it's fine. But I think the word complacency is going to kick in, maybe not this year, but next year, say 3 years down the road. I don't hear a lot of accountability for, if something goes vertical, who's the responsible person? Now, we all read the papers, we all know the people that came from homeless shelters that have committed some heinous crimes. Now, that's not to put them all in that same frame. And I don't want that to be the type of people that are always going to be at a place like the Sunset Motel. But I've got 94 signatures on there from the residents that are in my community. They're concerned. They're very concerned. Okay? And I would like for you to be able to take that in consideration when you start to, talk amongst yourselves and to be able to say whether or not that we're going to approve this. Also, the business community. I had signatures from the business community in the southern part of Greenport, where half of the folks that are on that list had a direct violation of their premises, whether they were broken into, whether there was property damage, and they were all people that came from the Sunset Motel. Well, I know you're putting all kinds of types of safeguards in place to be able to make sure that this doesn't happen, but if it does happen, who do we go to? Who gets the blame? If something out of this world happens because they were housed in the Sunset Motel. Let's go to the extremes. Say someone commits a murder. Okay? That's been done. We've all read the papers and know that these people who are housed in these facilities have that opportunity, and that's what they've done. Who gets the blame? Does the chairman? Does the DSS? Mr. Galvan? I mean, who is really going to be held responsible? Because that seems to be the problem today. Nobody's responsible for anything. It's always somebody else's fault. Okay? I just don't want, riding their bikes through my community, having to go down by the mailboxes because their direct route from Sunset Motel to the Extra Mart or the Hannafords, they're going to cut across my private property. That's unacceptable. I can't tell you how many times that I've had to tell people from a prior experience, you can't come this way, you have to go out on Route 82 and 9. Of course, I get vulgarity, I get, they're going to... That's what my experience has been. It's not been pleasant. And believe me, there's a need for what we're trying to do at the Sunset Motel, but I do not feel that the Sunset Motel or the Galvan Motel is the proper place to do this. It doesn't have the proper transportation. You've got to, if you're going to go to programs, what are you going to do? You're going to have it there? You're going to pick them up and take them into Hudson where there's facilities? It just doesn't make my type of sense. And I just want you to be able to take consideration from the business communities that have been located in the southern part of Greenport. We've been there 58 years. Ben Funk's been there over 7 years. I want you to be able to just take in consideration the signatures that are here that were presented to you in opposition of this plan. That's number one. Number two, I bought a property on the east side and on the south side of the Galvan property. Would somebody be able to tell me where 2,000 gallons of wastewater is going when you have zero percolation on that lot? This has not been addressed. There's not been addressed the drainage, the water, refuge, where is it going to be located. They haven't been told that they have to go to the planning board of the town of Greenport to have a site plan review which would address all these particular issues, to be able to make the property owners that surround the property comfortable with this place being either being a DSS participant or an overnight accommodation, which, by the way, does anybody here try to be able to get a place to put their family in an overnight accommodation? Why doesn't Mr. Galvan go in that direction instead of the DSS side? I can't understand that. It makes more sense to me to be able to provide a nice overnight accommodation hotel, which when those 20 containers were lined up end to end, I said, great, this is great. They're going to bring the Sunset Motel back to its former glory, to be able to make it possible for overnight accommodations, because there's a definite need in the county. We all know that. Try to find a place for your family to stay on a weekend or wedding occasions or whatever. Unless you want to pay $200+ a night, it's tough. It's very difficult. So my recommendation is to make sure that before you make any kind of decisions, have the Galvan people go to the planning board so that they can put these conditions on so that we could address drainage, water, curb cuts, parking, all of the things that we would have to do. They're building a 23-bedroom home out there. And if you're going to build a 23-bedroom house, you better want to believe that the Columbia County Health Department is going to want to see engineered plans for a septic design that's going to be able to handle it when you got zero percolation on that property. So, these are the concerns that not only I have, but the people that are surrounding this property. This is not a 10-acre parcel where they've got all kinds of room. It's pretty tight. Consists of 2 acres, maybe 3, not even that. But it's a long, narrow, bowling alley type lot. And I don't know where the wastewater is. Is it going on my property? Is it going on my next door neighbor's property? Nobody has addressed that. Okay, these are just simple, basic questions that if I'm going to build a place that they're building, or be able to renovate it, bring it back, and put it on, you know, on the marketplace, I'm going to have a lot of people asking me the questions that I just asked you. And I would feel more comfortable if they were made to go to the planning board, where the planning board can go through the A, B, C, D, E list, to be able to make sure that they justify and they answer the questions and the concerns that the property owners have surrounding this property.
Thank you.
That's it.
Supervisor Sterling, you had a question?
Yeah. I want to thank everybody for coming. I've talked to some of you. I definitely had concerns myself and the woman behind the camera there. I feel like we just don't have enough details yet. The devil is in the details. I know there's a shifting site plan. There's concern. I want to also know that the septic and electric and everything is up to code. And I'm scared to death about those small sinks. I realize that I haven't seen what's going to be in the rooms. And definitely, if you've got families there, I know what it's like in a motel. You brush your teeth. It's horrible. And some of those little fridges too, and we're told there's going to be a microwave and a fridge, but I haven't seen the model. And I think we should see an exact, size of the room and exactly what's going to go into it. And also, I think right now you're doing reconstruction, so you're not getting a building permit. Is that true?
So we have building permits already. Site plan review isn't required because the existing use is a motel.
Yeah.
But we've been working very closely with the Greenport building inspector, and we have construction permits. And I'd be happy to share floor plans that show the furniture layout so you can see what's going to fit in each room, and you can see the square footage of each room as well. They'll all include a table, chairs, a bed, a private bathroom, refrigerator, a microwave. So I'll be happy to share that with the board of supervisors so you can see.
One idea I had about families too is I had experience with a woman who had a lot of children here, and I think if you're going to have families with several children, they probably have more than one room. And if you don't have a connecting door, that mother or the parents are not going to let those kids sleep in another room by themselves when they can't have the door open. So I think a connecting door in any family units so they can be expanded would be wonderful.
We have those.
Now what about septic and water? What is the situation there?
That's I can consult with our project engineer, but that's all been worked out between our architect and the building inspector.
That's wrong. Don't lie to us.
Engineer design, septic design submitted to the Columbia County Health Department for review. That has not been done. That place was built in the 50s, and those old septic tanks, as far as I know, have never been replaced. And if you dig down into the ground, you're going to have zero percolation. So please, don't tell me that you've had that all taken care of. It's not taken care of, and it's a very grave concern for me because I border your property on two sides, and I don't want your wastewater going on my property.
Excuse me, it's something that is being discussed and that the building inspector and our project engineer are on top of.
So you have a septic design engineer working on this now?
I can consult with our engineer to figure out where we are with the septic design if the Board of Supervisors would like to see more on this question. But we're developing the space in full compliance with the code.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to bring something up that's bothering me as an attorney. I mean, it seems like you're all enamored of Galvan. I don't understand this. I know that there are a lot of concerns, residents about Galvan, whether they're really a nonprofit, what they're doing with warehousing.
Can I interrupt you? This isn't about Galvan. This is about the motel proposed down there.
By Galvan.
I'd imagine that that any number of people could say something about Galvan, or anybody, any entity. They could say it about Howard Johnson's or Marriott, but we can't get into...
Let me tell you why I'm raising that.
Okay, I'll let you...
Because we have a representative, Galvan, here today making verbal assurances about how the rooms are going to be so nice and there'll be big rooms for the families, but unless there's something specified in the contract that the DSS's attorney, the county attorney, should be on this, to, in my view, to specify what we want from Galvan to provide. If you want sinks of a certain size, that has to be in the contract. If you want to require Galvan to put in family-size rooms, that needs to be in the contract. So my point is just that he may make oral representations today and make everyone happy, but unless it's put in for the benefit of DSS, it doesn't matter. So, for example, changing the sheets, that's been raised. Unless there's something in the contract that requires sheets of a certain quality and frequency of changing, there's no obligation on the operator's part to do that. That's just what I want to raise.
Thank you, Bert. Is there any other comments? Yes, ma'am.
Speaking on the business side, not the humanitarian side, I can tell you that with the local business community in that area, it is a huge sticking point that they have not had to go before the site plan committee, before those boards. And a lot of those concerns are what Tom brought up. Everybody else around there has been through it with the Greenport site plan committee board, whatever it is called. I'm not good at terms, as we know. But if you are going to do any business in that town, generally you go and you ask for a building permit and they send you to the site plan board. The business has been shuttered for more than 3 years. I understand that they're reopening as an accommodation, but it's no longer a hotel. So there has been a change in use if the rooms are dedicated elsewhere. If you open a business in that local community, you have to go through site plan review. You have to show where the septic is going. You have to show where your groundwater is going. You have to show all of these things. The neighboring properties have had to do that at great expense. When we call the building inspector, he says, well, it's just renovation. As much to my knowledge, renovation is 50% or less. Some of those buildings are completely new sticks from the ground up. Right? That's not renovation anymore, that's new construction. And I know that this isn't necessarily your field. This is an issue with the town of Greenport. But the points that Tom made about the wastewater, about all of these things, all of us had to go through this. We call up and say, why don't they? Well, it's a county thing. That's what we hear.
Well, if they said that, if somebody said that to you, they shouldn't have said that to you, because we don't have any jurisdiction over enforcing the building code. That's a town of Greenport issue.
Yeah. But I can tell you.
Mackey's sitting right there. Where does the town of Greenport stand on it?
I meet with my building inspectors on Saturday mornings, and the project plan was up on the table, and I was told that it was a motel, and even though it was stick-built, it's zoned as a motel, so that's how they did it. The office was under review because of office space and change in use, and they've obtained the building permits. They do know about the swimming pool. When they drained, I spoke to them about the no percolation and what's going on with the septic system. I was told it had to go before the county, Columbia County Department of Health. So,
Should be required by a site plan.
Well, as of this morning, there's been no plans submitted to the Columbia County Health Department for any kind of review. They're completely out of the loop, and I've been in communication with them for the last 2 months. And what I get is that they're supposed to contact us. They're supposed to. No one has taken the effort to be able to address this, the drainage. I mean, I can't believe that this project has even gone this far without these type of concerns being addressed. I know it would have to be done. You know, I'm the chairman of the ZBA board in the town of Livingston. Maybe I know too much, but I know if it was Livingston, before a shingle was taken off of that roof, all of the concerns that we have mentioned today would be addressed before any type of construction was started. But it hasn't. All right, now Greenport had a visiting zoning. I'm not going to get into that. I just want to be able to make sure that the facility, once it's up and running, with 25 bedrooms, laundry facilities, wastewater, probably in excess of 2,000 gallons. Where's it going? Is it going on my property? Is it going on Andy's property? Is it going on the people that live around the area? It's got zero percolation. Dig down in the ground on that property right now, foot and a half down in the ground, you got water. You know,
Can the people of Greenport be assured, Kathy, that you're going to follow up on this? Because you're the supervisor, right?
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Well, then we'll leave it
It
in your
certainly
hands.
seems like Greenport has rolled out the red carpet for the Galvan
Yeah.
Foundation. That's the problem.
Feathers are definitely ruffled, if not great concerns have been raised at the way that Greenport's just kind of gone, okay. Because the rest of us have had to come see you again and again and again before we get a, okay. And there's stipulations, and there's concerns about light pollution, and there's all of these other things that you don't think of until you stood before a planning board and you're going, what? But they haven't had to do any of that.
Okay, are there any other comments? If not, it's almost 6 o'clock. I know some
Against
people.
the neighborhood. We're not against families or children or homeless. But because DSS did use that prior motel as a dumping ground for your alcoholics, your substance abuse, and this went on for quite a few years that created so many problems, that's why the people are on the defensive. We're not against it. We just know what DSS did before, and we want to be assured that it's not going to happen again.
Thank you very much. Okay.
And I just want to say one thing, as the supervisor of the town of Greenport, that's why I'm here. When I come to the county meetings, I represent Greenport. I don't vote for how I feel, how I personally feel. I represent Greenport, so every feather that's ruffled out there means something to me. So it's not that Greenport has given like the green light, the go-ahead. It's not just a Greenport thing. So I want you to understand. I want you to understand that.
I think we understand that it's not just a Greenport thing, but it's also not a county thing in that respect.
But your building inspector, the town of Greenport, doesn't know what's going on there?
Yes, they do.
Yeah.
Yes, they do.
And he's aware of all these things that they've not followed up on?
Yes, and as I said, the septic has to go to the Columbia County Board of Health. That's their responsibility, okay? So that's their responsibility when they get the certificate of occupancy. That will all be looked at. But any changes that they wanted to make to the motel, it was zoned as a motel, and back up it went. Changes to the main building were looked at, and they had the building permit.
It speaks to the legal wording in the town code as to what is new construction and required new construction and what is renovation. And I think that's the sticking point.
Well, thank you all for coming. Thank you for your comments. We're consider them. We're not voting on anything tonight. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make it.
Second? All in favor? Opposed? So carried.